Some secrets burn so deep they turn love into ashes. By morning, I'd watch her world collapse while mine rose from the ruins. The night started like any other, a blur of clinking glasses and forced smiles, the kind of party you attend because you're supposed to, not because you want to. My wife, Avery Holt, had been buzzing about it for weeks, picking out her dress, fussing over the guest list, reminding me a dozen times not to be late. She'd chosen a red number that clung to her curves like a second skin, and when we walked into the sprawling living room of our friend's suburban mansion, heads turned. She glowed under the attention, her dark hair catching the chandelier light, her laugh cutting through the hum of conversation. I stood beside her, nursing a whiskey, playing the part of the proud husband. For a moment, everything felt right. We'd been married 7 years. 7 years of routines, compromises, and quiet resentments I'd learned to ignore. Avery was the spark, the one who lit up rooms, while Grayson Holt, was the steady hand, the guy who paid the bills and kept the ship afloat. She'd always been restless, chasing something I could never quite pin down, but I chalked it up to her spirit. That night, though, something shifted. I felt it before I saw it. A prickle at the back of my neck, like the air had thickened. It started with a glance. She was mid-conversation with a mutual friend, her wine glass tilted just so, when her eyes flicked across the room. Quick, subtle, but I caught it. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was looking for someone, scanning the crowd of familiar faces. But then her lips twitched, a soft curl at the edges, and my stomach tightened. I followed her gaze, cutting through the sea of partygoers, until I landed on him. He stood by the fireplace, tall and dark-haired, his suit crisp and his posture too relaxed for a stranger in this crowd. Nolan Reed. I didn't know his name then, but I'd learn it soon enough. He wasn't just looking at her. He was staring, his eyes locked on Avery like she was the only person in the room. My grip tightened on my glass, the ice clinking faintly as my hand shook. I tried to shake it off. Maybe they knew each other. Maybe it was innocent. Then her phone lit up. She glanced down, her thumb brushing the screen, and that smirk, small, fleeting, crossed her face again. She turned to me, her smile forced now, too bright. "I'm just going to grab another drink," she said, her voice casual, like she hadn't rehearsed it. She didn't wait for me to respond, just slipped away, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she moved toward the bar. But I wasn't blind. I watched her weave through the crowd, and she didn't stop at the bar. She stopped at him. They stood close, too close, her body angled toward his, her head tilting up as she spoke. His hand brushed her arm, a deliberate graze, and instead of pulling back, she leaned in. My chest burned, a slow simmer of disbelief and rage bubbling up. I could have convinced myself it was nothing, a flirty moment fueled by too much wine. But then they moved, together, slipping through a side door like shadows, vanishing from the room as if they'd rehearsed it. The party carried on, laughter, music, the clatter of plates. But it all faded to a dull roar in my ears. My heart pounded, a deafening drumbeat of betrayal. I could have followed them. I could have stormed through that door, ripped it open, and let everyone see what I just witnessed. But I didn't. Something colder took over. I set my drink down, straightened my jacket, and walked out. The cool night air hit me like a slap, my breath steady despite the hurricane inside. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a scene. Not yet. I stepped onto the street, the party lights flickering behind me, mocking me with their cheer. Every step felt like tearing away from a life I'd been too blind to question. A life I'd built with a woman who just shredded it without a second thought. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there. By morning, Avery would regret everything. But it wouldn't be because of me. It'd be because of her. The night air bit at my skin as I walked away from the party, each breath a sharp, deliberate pull to keep the storm inside me from breaking loose. My shoes scuffed the pavement, the rhythm steady but aimless, carrying me further from the mansion's glow and the life I'd thought I knew. 7 years with Avery Holt. 7 years of late-night talks, shared leases, and promises I'd taken as gospel, now unraveling like a cheap threadbare rug. I could still see her in that red dress, The way it hugged her hips. The way she'd leaned into Nolan Reed like I wasn't even there. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms. But I didn't turn back. Not yet. I wasn't sure how long I wandered, minutes, maybe an hour, before the neon sign of a diner caught my eye. It was one of those 24-hour joints, the kind that smelled of grease and regret, a haven for the lost and the restless. The bell jingled as I pushed through the glass door, the sound cutting through the late-night stillness. Inside, the place was nearly empty. A trucker hunched over a plate of fries in the corner, a flickering fluorescent light buzzing overhead. I slid into a booth by the window, the cracked vinyl creaking under me, and stared out at the empty street. My reflection stared back. Hollow eyes, jaw tight, a man I barely recognized. A waitress approached, her apron stained with coffee rings, her face lined with the kind of tired that came from years of late shifts. Lillian Voss, her name tag read, though she introduced herself with a raspy, "Call me Lily." She slid a menu across the table, but I waved it off. "Just coffee?" I muttered, my voice low, rougher than I intended. She nodded, no questions asked, and shuffled back to the counter. When she returned with a steaming mug, she lingered, studying me with those sharp, knowing eyes. "Rough night, huh?" she said, more statement than question. I met her gaze, the weight of the evening pressing down like a physical thing. "You could say that." My fingers wrapped around the mug, the heat grounding me as I took a sip, bitter, strong, exactly what I needed. Lily didn't push, just gave a small nod and left me to my silence. I appreciated that. The last thing I wanted was small talk, not when my mind was replaying every second of Avery's betrayal in high definition. I pulled out my phone, the screen lighting up with no notifications. No text from Avery. No, "Where are you?" No, "Are you okay?" Nothing. Of course not. She was too busy with him. The thought sent a fresh wave of acid through my gut. But I didn't call her. Didn't text. Instead, I opened our shared phone account. Something I hadn't checked in months, maybe years. Why would I? Trust was supposed to be the backbone of us. My thumb scrolled through the call logs, and there it was. A number I didn't recognize, popping up over and over. Late-night calls, quick texts, patterns stretching back weeks, months, even times when she'd said she was working late, or crashed at a friend's, or just needed space. I copied the number, saved it, my jaw tightening as the pieces clicked into place. Then I dug deeper. Our joint banking app, another thing I rarely bothered with since I was the one funding our life while she flitted between freelance gigs. A few taps, and there they were. Transactions she hadn't bothered to hide. A hotel charge from 2 weeks ago, $189 at a place I'd never heard of. Dinner receipts. Fancy spots I'd never been invited to. Lyft rides at odd hours. One just 3 nights ago when she claimed she was too tired to meet me after work. My coffee went cold as I stared at the screen, each entry a knife twisting deeper. She hadn't just betrayed me with Nolan. She'd been living a double life, funded by my money, my trust. Lily came back with the pot, refilling my mug without a word. She hesitated, though, her eyes flicking to my clenched hand, the phone glowing on the table. "You all right, Han?" she asked, her voice softer now, laced with that motherly edge strangers sometimes offered when they smelled trouble. I exhaled slowly, meeting her gaze. "Not really." It was the first honest thing I'd said all night. She nodded, like she'd heard it 1,000 times before, and retreated to the counter. I stayed there, the hours bleeding into each other, watching the streetlights flicker as the nightlife dwindled. The trucker left. A couple of drunks stumbled in, then out. My thoughts didn't race anymore. They sharpened, hardening into something cold and clear. Avery didn't know I was gone yet. She didn't know I'd seen. That meant she was still with him, tangled in whatever lie she'd spun for herself. And that realization didn't break me. It woke me up. I paid my bill. $5 for the coffee, a 10 for Lily's quiet kindness, and stepped back into the night. The air was colder now, sharper, slicing through the fog in my head. I checked my phone one last time. Still nothing from Avery. Good. Let her think she was in control a little longer. I hailed a cab, the yellow glow of its sign a beacon in the dark, and slid into the back seat. The driver, a grizzled guy with a thick Boston accent, glanced at me in the rear view. Where to? I didn't hesitate. I gave him an address I'd never needed to know until tonight. The one tied to that number in Avery's call logs, cross-checked with a quick reverse lookup I'd done while nursing my second coffee. Nolan Reed's place. I didn't know what I'd do when I got there. Confront him, see her, or just stand in the shadows and watch. But I needed to know. The cab pulled away, tires humming against the asphalt, and I leaned back, staring out at the blurred city lights. My marriage was a house of cards, and Avery had just flicked the first one down. By morning, I'd make sure the whole damn thing collapsed. The cab ride was a blur, the city lights streaking past like smears of paint on a canvas I no longer cared to decipher. My mind was a live wire, buzzing with every detail. The way Avery's hips swayed as she slipped through that side door, the graze of Nolan's hand on her arm, the smirk she hadn't bothered to hide. I'd spent years building a life with her, brick by brick, only to watch her torch it in a single night. The driver didn't speak, just kept his eyes on the road, and I was grateful for the silence. I needed it to think, to plan, to let the anger simmer into something I could use. We pulled up to a sleek apartment complex, all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed money and pretense. I recognized it instantly, not because I'd been here, but because I knew that car. Parked in the lot, gleaming under a streetlight, was a black Audi sedan, the same one Nolan Reed drove. My stomach twisted, not with shock, but with a sick confirmation. Nolan wasn't just some random guy Avery had stumbled into, he was my friend, or had been. We'd shared beers at my wedding, swapped stories over backyard grills, laughed about life's absurdities. Now here I was, staring at his car, knowing my wife was inside with him. The betrayal wasn't a cut anymore. It was a gaping wound, raw and pulsing. The driver glanced back at me, his bushy brows lifting. "You need me to wait?" I almost said yes, almost clung to the safety of the cab, the chance to retreat, but I shook my head. "No, I'm good." I paid him, stepped out, and let the door slam shut behind me. The night air was frigid now, biting at my knuckles as I stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the building. My breath fogged in front of me, slow and controlled, a stark contrast to the chaos in my chest. I didn't know what I was walking into, but my feet moved anyway, driven by a need I couldn't name. The entrance was locked, a keypad glowing faintly by the door. I punched in a code, 4 digits Nolan had given me years ago when he'd bragged about his new place, back when I thought he was someone I could trust. The lock clicked, and I stepped inside. The lobby was quiet, sterile, all polished marble and dim lighting. I hit the elevator button, the hum of it descending the only sound in the stillness. When the doors slid open, I stepped in, pressed 3, and leaned against the cold metal wall. My reflection stared back from the mirrored panel. Eyes dark, jaw set, a man on the edge of something he couldn't undo. The elevator dinged, and I stepped into the hallway, the carpet muffling my steps as I approached his door. Apartment 3B. I stood there for a moment, fist hovering, listening. No sound came from inside. No music, no laughter, just a heavy silence that felt like a lie. I knocked, 3 sharp raps, the sound echoing down the hall. My pulse hammered in my ears, a steady thrum of anticipation and dread. The door swung open faster than I expected, and there he was, Nolan Reed, hair tousled, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his face paling the second he saw me. He gripped the doorframe, frozen, like he couldn't decide whether to slam it shut or bolt. Before he could speak, a voice floated from behind him, soft and careless. "Babe, who is it?" My stomach lurched, twisting at that word, babe, like a punch I hadn't braced for. Avery appeared, stepping into view, and the sight of her hit me like a freight train. She was barefoot, drowning in one of Nolan's oversized dress shirts, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was mussed, her lips still flushed from whatever they'd been doing. For a split second, time stopped. Her eyes locked on mine, confusion flickering into realization, then panic, then guilt, then fear. 5 emotions in a heartbeat, and I watched them play out like a silent movie. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of what we all knew. Avery opened her mouth, probably to spin some excuse, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. Don't. One word, sharp and final, and it landed like a guillotine. She flinched, her lips trembling, and I saw it. She knew there was no talking her way out of this. Nolan exhaled, a jagged sound, running a hand through his hair. Listen, man. I laughed. A hollow, bitter thing that echoed off the walls. Don't. Just don't. I shifted my gaze between them, taking in the scene. The faint scent of Nolan's cologne, the rumpled couch in the background, the half-empty wine glasses on the counter. It was a snapshot of betrayal, framed in a life I'd been excluded from. Avery reached for me, her voice cracking. Grayson, wait. I stepped back, shaking my head. I hope it was worth it. My tone was low, steady, a blade wrapped in calm. Her hand fell, her eyes welling up, but I didn't care. Not anymore. Nolan wouldn't meet my gaze. His shoulders slumped, guilt radiating off him like heat. I looked at them one last time. At the woman I'd loved, the friend I'd trusted, and something clicked into place. I wasn't the fool here. They were. I turned and walked away, my steps deliberate, measured. Behind me, I heard her. Avery's footsteps, fast and desperate, her voice breaking. Please, just talk to me. I reached the elevator, pressed the button, and turned to face her. She stood a few feet away, tears streaking her face, her hands outstretched like she could pull me back. I met her frantic gaze, unflinching, and let the doors slide shut between us. The last thing I saw was her crumpling, her sobs muffled as the elevator descended. Back outside, the cold hit me harder, a slap of clarity against my skin. I stood on the sidewalk, the building looming behind me, and exhaled. The weight on my chest wasn't rage anymore. It wasn't even pain. It was something sharper, something freeing. I'd walked away from my marriage tonight, from a woman who'd played me, from a friend who'd stabbed me in the back. And I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the screen dark and silent. No messages, no calls, not yet. She'd try soon, I knew that, but it didn't matter. She'd lost her grip on me, and she didn't even realize it. I started walking, the city stretching out before me, vast and indifferent. I needed a place to crash, to think, to figure out what came next. My brother Declan's place wasn't far. An old, chaotic apartment that smelled of pizza and freedom. He'd take me in, no questions asked. I flagged down another cab, slid into the back seat, and gave the driver the address. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at Nolan's building. I didn't need to. That chapter was over. The cab rolled through the city, the hum of the engine a steady pulse beneath my thoughts. Streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and white, casting fleeting shadows across the back seat. I leaned my head against the window, the glass cool against my temple, and let the exhaustion settle in. Not the kind that begged for sleep, but the bone-deep weariness of a man who'd just walked away from everything he'd known. Avery's tear-streaked face lingered in my mind, her voice echoing, "Please, just talk to me." But it didn't pull me back, pushed me forward. I gave the driver Declan's address, a rundown apartment building on the edge of town where the rent was cheap and the neighbors minded their own business. My brother and I weren't estranged, not exactly, but we'd always lived in different orbits. Declan was the wild card, tattooed, restless, bouncing from odd jobs to fleeting romances, a guy who thrived on chaos. I'd been the opposite, Grayson Holt, the reliable one, the man with the steady career and the mortgage, the guy who'd built a life so stable it bordered on suffocating. Look where that had gotten me. Tonight, though, Declan's world felt like the only place I could breathe. The cab pulled up to a weathered brick building, its fire escape rusted and its windows smudged with years of neglect. I paid the fare, stepped out, and took the stairs 2 at a time, the metal creaking under my weight. The hallway smelled faintly of stale beer and cigarette smoke, a familiar scent from the times I dragged Declan home after one of his benders. I knocked on his door, 3 quick raps, and waited, the silence stretching until I heard the shuffle of footsteps inside. The door swung open, and there he was, Declan Holt, bleary-eyed and shirtless, his dark hair a mess, a half-lit cigarette dangling from his lips. He blinked at me, squinting against the hallway light. "Dude, it's like 2 in the morning. What the hell?" I exhaled, a ghost of a smirk tugging at my mouth. "Yeah, I know." He took one look at me. My rumpled jacket, the shadows under my eyes, and his expression shifted, the sleepiness giving way to something sharper. He stepped aside, jerking his head. "Come in." The apartment was a disaster, as always. Pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table, a couch that doubled as a bed with blankets spilling onto the floor, an Xbox controller tangled in its own cord. It was chaos, but it was his, and right now that was enough. I dropped onto the couch, elbows on my knees, and ran a hand over my face. Declan shut the door, flicked his cigarette into an ashtray, and stood there, arms crossed, studying me. "What happened?" I let out a humorless laugh, the sound scraping my throat. "Avery." That was all it took. His posture stiffened, his jaw tightening like he'd already guessed the punchline. "What did she do?" His voice was low, edged with the protective streak he'd always had, even when we were kids scrapping in the backyard. I leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. "Nolan." Silence. Then a slow, deliberate exhale as he pieced it together. "You've got to be kidding me." He ran a hand through his hair, muttering a string of curses under his breath before disappearing into the kitchen. I heard the fridge door yank open, the sharp crack of a beer can, and he returned, tossing one to me before cracking his own. He sat across from me on a rickety chair, leaning forward. "All right, tell me everything." So I did. The party, the glance, the way she'd slipped away with Nolan like I was invisible. The call logs, the receipts, the confrontation at his apartment, her in his shirt, him too guilty to even look at me. I laid it all out, every ugly detail, my voice steady despite the fire it stoked inside me. By the time I finished, Declan's grip on his beer was white-knuckled, the aluminum denting slightly under his fingers. "That's some next-level betrayal," he said, shaking his head. "And Nolan? The guy was at our damn 4th of July cookout last year." "I know." The memory stung. Nolan clapping me on the back, Avery laughing at his dumb jokes, all of us oblivious to the rot festering beneath. Declan took a long swig, then fixed me with a hard look. "So what now?" I cracked my beer open, the cold fizz a small relief against the heat in my chest. "I don't know yet, but I'm not going back. Not to her, not to that life." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to Avery's contact. Her smiling photo staring back at me, a lie frozen in time. With one deep breath, I blocked her. Number, social media, every digital thread she could use to reach me, gone. Declan watched, his lips twitching into a grin. "Damn, cold. It's what she deserves." I set the phone down, the weight of that act settling over me like a new skin. For years, I'd bent over backwards to keep her happy. Late nights covering her bills, swallowing her excuses, smoothing over her moods. No more. Declan leaned back, cracking his knuckles. "You really not gonna talk to her? She's gotta be losing her mind right now." I smirked, taking a sip. "Good. Let her unravel. Let her feel the void she'd carved out." I wasn't after revenge. Not the loud, messy kind. I wanted control, the kind I'd surrendered to her for too long. I opened my banking app again, double-checking the transactions I'd found earlier. The hotel, the dinners, the rides, all on my dime. My jaw tightened. That was ending too. I started the process to lock her out, froze the joint credit cards, flagged the accounts. She'd wake up to a reality she couldn't charm her way out of. Declan whistled low. "You're not messing around." "Nope." I leaned back, the couch springs groaning under me. "She played me, December. Both of them did. But I'm done being the idiot who picks up the pieces." He nodded, a rare flicker of respect in his eyes. "You're crashing here, right?" "Yeah, for now." I didn't have a plan beyond tonight, but this felt right, raw, unpolished, A clean break from the polished lie I'd lived. The beer was cheap, the apartment a mess, but for the first time in years I felt free. Avery had shattered the illusion, and I wasn't mourning it. I was stepping out of it. As I sat there, the silence between us thick with unspoken understanding, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The next morning, I woke to the faint hum of Declan's Xbox still running, the screen frozen on some paused game he'd abandoned midnight. My neck ached from the lumpy couch, but I didn't care. Sleep had come fast and dreamless, a mercy after the chaos of the night before. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, the weight of Avery's betrayal settling into a dull ache rather than a sharp stab. The apartment was quiet, Declan still passed out in his room, the faint snore drifting through the thin walls. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, expecting silence. I was wrong. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, texts from unknown numbers. Avery. She'd figured out I'd blocked her and was scrambling, switching tactics like a cornered animal. I scrolled through them, detached, almost amused. The first few were tentative, pleading, "Grayson, we need to talk. Please pick up." Then came the guilt trips. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this. You're overreacting." By the fifth, she was unraveling. "You're being unfair. This isn't how marriage works. You can't just ignore me." That last one made me laugh. A dry, bitter sound that echoed in the empty room. I could ignore her. I would. I didn't reply, didn't call back. Every message was a hook she'd thrown, hoping I'd bite. But I wasn't the same man who'd swallowed her excuses for years. I set the phone down and stretched, the stiffness in my shoulders a reminder of the night I'd walked away. Declan shuffled out of his room, bleary-eyed, a mug of instant coffee in hand. He glanced at my expression and smirked. "She finally figured it out, huh?" I nodded, tilting the phone toward him so he could see the barrage. He snorted, reading one aloud. "You can't just ignore me. Oh, she's losing it quick. She thought she could control this," I said, leaning back. "Thought I'd be the one begging her to explain." Declan grinned, finishing my thought. "But you beat her to it." He took a sip, wincing at the taste. "Man, she's got to be sweating bullets. Let her." I stood, pacing the small living room, my mind already shifting gears. Avery's desperation was her problem now, not mine. I had moves to make, ones she wouldn't see coming. I opened my banking app again, the transactions from last night still glaring back at me. Hotel charges, dinners, rides, all on our joint accounts, my money fueling her lies. Not anymore. With a few taps, I transferred every cent from our savings into my personal account. Years of my earnings, untouched by her sporadic freelancing. Then I locked the credit cards, froze the checking account, cut her off cold. She'd wake up to a financial wall she couldn't charm her way through. Declan watched, eyebrows raised. "That's ruthless." "It's mine," I said simply, tossing the phone onto the couch. "She doesn't get to play victim with my money." He chuckled, shaking his head. "She's gonna flip when she tries to buy her morning latte." Good. The thought of her standing at a counter, card declined, brought a flicker of satisfaction. Not petty, but earned. I wasn't done, though. This wasn't just about money. It was about ending her hold on me, legally and permanently. I grabbed my jacket, already dialing a number I'd saved weeks ago for a different reason. A lawyer I'd met at a work event, Kendra Miles. She'd struck me as sharp, no-nonsense, the kind of person who'd see through Avery's games. Kendra picked up on the second ring, her voice crisp despite the early hour. "Grayson? What's up?" "I need a divorce," I said, cutting to it. "Fast. And I want her to get nothing." Pause, then a low whistle. "All right, what's the situation?" I gave her the rundown, 7 years of marriage, my income as the sole breadwinner, Avery's affair with Nolan, the evidence piling up in call logs and bank statements. Kendra listened, interrupting only to clarify details, her tone shifting from curious to calculating. When I finished, she didn't hesitate. "You've got a strong case. Infidelity, financial dependency. She's got no leverage. We can file this week, lock her out of any claims." You free tomorrow? Yeah, I said, a weight lifting I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Let's do it. Perfect. I'll draft the papers. Bring everything you've got, screenshots, statements, anything that shows she's been playing you. We'll bury her. Her confidence was infectious, a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. We set a time and I hung up, the plan solidifying in my mind. Avery wouldn't just lose me. She'd lose everything she'd taken for granted. By afternoon, her desperation hit a new low. An email pinged in, a receipt for a one-way plane ticket, destination some coastal town hours away. I stared at it, then laughed. A bluff, obvious and pathetic. She'd sent it to rattle me, to make me think she was leaving, but an hour later another email landed, this one from Nolan. The audacity was almost impressive. Man, I think we should talk. This is getting out of hand. Avery's a wreck. She didn't mean to hurt you like this. Don't do anything rash. Just be reasonable. I read it twice, shaking my head. Reasonable? This guy had the nerve to preach reason after screwing my wife behind my back. Declan leaned over, scanning the screen, and groaned. Oh, hell no. He actually wrote that. He did. I smirked, my thumb hovering over the block button. Thinks I'm still the pushover who'd hear him out. Declan laughed, sharp and loud. This guy's lost his damn mind. What's he expect? Hugs and a beer? Probably. I blocked him, the same clean cut I'd given Avery. No explanations, no second chances. They didn't deserve my words, let alone my time. The satisfaction wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, steady. A reclaiming of power I'd let slip away over years. I stayed at Declan's for the next few days, settling into a rhythm that felt strangely normal: work, gym, crashing on his couch. My phone buzzed less as Avery's attempts tapered off, her unknown numbers running dry. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. That night, I came home from a run, sweat-soaked and clear-headed, only to stop short at the sight of her. Avery, sitting on the steps outside Declan's building, mascara smudged, hair a tangled mess. She looked up, scrambling to her feet, her voice shaky. Finally, you're here. I crossed my arms, unimpressed. What are you doing here? I needed to talk to you, she said, wiping her face. Please, just 5 minutes. I studied her, the panic, the trembling hands. It wasn't remorse. It was fear, pure and raw, the terror of losing control. I smirked, stepping around her, keys in hand. Too bad. Your 5 minutes ran out. Grayson, she started. But I pushed the door open, stepped inside, and let it slam shut in her face. The muffled sound of her sobs followed, but I didn't pause. I'd already won this round. Tomorrow, with Kendra's help, I'd win the war. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, the kind that came from shedding a skin that no longer fit. Declan's apartment was still a mess. Empty beer cans and a pizza box from last night strewn across the table, but it felt like a fortress, a place where Avery's shadow couldn't reach. My phone stayed quiet, her barrage of messages finally exhausted, but I wasn't naive. She'd try again. People like her didn't let go without clawing for control. I wasn't waiting for her next move, though. I was already 3 steps ahead. I started with the bank. A quick trip downtown, a sit-down with a teller, and every joint account was secured. Savings emptied into my name, credit cards frozen, her access severed. The teller, a young guy with a nervous smile, asked if I was sure. Never been surer, I said, signing the last form with a flourish. Checkmate. Avery wouldn't know yet, but when she did, she'd feel the ground shift beneath her. My money, my rules, hers now was a world without a safety net. Next, I met Kendra Miles at her office, a sleek corner suite with a view of the city skyline. She was all business, dark blazer, sharp eyes, a stack of papers already spread across her desk. You've got gold here, she said, tapping the screenshots I'd handed over. Call logs, bank statements, timestamps of Avery's double life. No prenup, you're the earner, and she's got nothing to stand on with this affair. We'll file today. She won't see a dime. I leaned back, a slow grin spreading. How fast can we move? Fast, she said, her pen scratching across a notepad. Court's backed up, but with this evidence, we'll push for an expedited hearing. You're in the driver's seat, Grayson. Her confidence was a steel beam, propping up the resolve I'd been forging since that night at the party. I left her office lighter, the divorce papers in motion, my future untangling from Avery's grip. Then came the real blow, not legal, not financial, but social. I didn't blast it online, too messy, too cheap. Instead, I let the truth slip to the people who mattered. A quiet grenade with a long fuse. First, Avery's parents. I called her mom, Ellen, a sweet woman who'd always treated me like a son. She picked up on the first ring, her voice warm. Grayson, how's my favorite son-in-law? Not great, I said, keeping it steady. I'm divorcing Avery. She's been cheating on me with Nolan Reed. The line went dead silent, a vacuum swallowing her usual chatter. She did what? Her voice cracked, disbelief bleeding through. Cheated. With Nolan. For months, maybe longer. I didn't embellish, just the facts, cold and bare. A sharp inhale, then a whispered, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." A pause. She's going to regret this. Ellen wasn't the type to stay quiet. By nightfall, Avery's dad would know. Then her aunts, her cousins. The family she'd leaned on would turn, not out of spite, but disappointment. I hung up, satisfied. One domino down. Next, our friends. I didn't call a meeting or send a group text. Just dropped it casually over coffee with a couple we'd known since college. Yeah, Avery and I are done, I said, stirring my drink. She's been with Nolan behind my back for a while. Their jaws dropped, eyes wide shock, then disgust. Nolan? Our Nolan? One asked. I nodded, sipping my coffee as they processed it, their loyalty shifting in real time. Word would spread. Mutual friends, co-workers, the tight-knit circle Avery thrived in. Her fantasy of playing the victim was crumbling. By afternoon, the backlash hit. My phone buzzed, not Avery, but a friend from our old book club. Hey, is Avery okay? She's posting weird stuff online. I checked, curious despite myself. Her social media was a mess, vague. Woe is me updates. Sometimes you don't see the truth until it's too late. Hurting. A pitiful attempt to spin it, to paint me as the bad guy. I smirked. She was flailing, and it wasn't working. Comments were sparse, a few sympathetic likes from distant acquaintances, but the core group, our group, stayed silent. They knew. Her next move came via text. A new number since I'd blocked the others. What the hell are you doing? You told my parents? You're ruining my life. I laughed, loud enough that Declan glanced over from the couch. Mid-game. She's pissed, he said, grinning. She did it to herself, I replied, deleting the message without responding. She'd wanted a reaction, a crack to slip through. She got nothing. The fallout snowballed. Another call, this time from a mutual friend. Jake. Dude, Avery's freaking out. She showed up at my place, crying, saying you're spreading lies. I rolled my eyes. It's not lies if it's true, Jake. She cheated with Nolan. I caught them. A long pause, then, damn, that's messed up. I'm sorry, man. He hung up, and I knew he'd tell others. Her allies were peeling away, her narrative sinking. That evening, Ellen called back, her voice tight. Grayson, I talked to Avery. She's a mess. Admits it's true but says you're being cruel. I don't even know what to say to her. I heard the heartbreak, the shame of a mother blindsided. She made her choice, Ellen. I'm just living with it. She sighed. Heavy. You didn't deserve this. No, I didn't. But I wasn't suffering, Avery was. By night, her desperation peaked. Another email. This one unhinged. You're a bastard. I made a mistake. Okay? But you're destroying me. Nolan doesn't even want me now. I leaned back on Declan's couch, savoring that last line. Nolan had bailed, shocker. Her house of cards was dust, and I hadn't lifted a finger beyond the truth. I didn't reply, just forwarded it to Kendra. More ammo for the divorce. Declan glanced over, pausing his game. She's imploding, huh? Like a star collapsing. I said, smirking. No one's buying her act. He laughed, shaking his head. You're a cold son of a bitch when you want to be. Only when it's earned. I stretched, the tension in my shoulders easing. Avery's world was burning, and I wasn't the arsonist. She'd lit the match herself. Her parents were ashamed. Her friends were gone. Her lover had cut and run. I'd taken back my money, my future, my dignity. She had nothing left to wield against me, and that was the sweetest victory yet. Tomorrow, Kendra would file and the legal hammer would drop. Tonight, though I slept soundly, the chaos hers alone to bear. The days at Declan's blurred into a strange kind of peace, work, gym, late nights with cheap beer and his off-key commentary on whatever game flickered across the TV. Avery's silence had settled in, her frantic messages drying up like a riverbed in drought. I didn't kid myself into thinking she'd given up. She was regrouping, plotting her next play, but I wasn't waiting for it. Kendra had filed the divorce papers, the evidence stacked high enough to bury Avery in court. My life was moving forward, steady and unburdened, until that Friday night when the past came knocking. It started with a pounding on Declan's door. Loud, insistent, the kind of knock that demanded attention. I was sprawled on the couch, a whiskey in hand, half watching some action flick when the sound jolted me upright. Declan glanced over from the kitchen, mid-bite of a cold slice of pizza, his brow furrowing. You expecting someone? Nope, I said, setting the glass down, my gut already tightening. I knew who it was before I reached the door. Only one person would show up unannounced, desperate enough to make a scene. I opened it, and there she stood, Avery Holt, a shadow of the woman I'd married. Her hair was a tangled mess, dark circles carved hollows under her eyes, her coat hanging off her like it belonged to someone else. But she wasn't alone. Beside her, just as ragged, was Nolan Reed's shirt wrinkled, stubble thick, his usual swagger replaced by a slump of defeat. I crossed my arms, leaning against the frame, and laughed. A sharp, incredulous bark that cut through the stillness. Well, I said, my voice dry. Look who it is. Avery's lip trembled, her hands twisting together as she stepped forward. Please, Grayson, just hear us out. Her voice was raw, cracked from crying or shouting or both. Nolan wouldn't meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the peeling paint of the hallway floor, shoulders hunched like a man who'd lost a fight he hadn't prepared for. I tilted my head, smirking. You two really are perfect for each other. Huh? Matching train wrecks. The barb landed. Avery flinched, Nolan's jaw twitched. But I didn't care. They'd come here, to my space, thinking they could salvage something. They were wrong. Nolan finally spoke, his voice low, strained. Man, we messed up. I know that. Oh, you don't say. I cut in, raising an eyebrow. What tipped you off? The part where you screwed my wife? Or the part where you thought I wouldn't find out? He winced, rubbing the back of his neck, his fingers trembling slightly. I'm not here to fight. We're not okay, all right? I'm trying to fix this. Fix it. I stepped forward, my tone icing over. You don't get to fix this, Nolan. You broke it. Both of you did. I shifted my gaze to Avery, her eyes welling up, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked small, fragile, but I knew better. Those tears weren't for me. They were for her, for the life she'd torched. Grayson, I lost everything, she said, her voice breaking. My job, my friends, my family, they won't even talk to me. I didn't mean for it to go this far. She took another step, reaching out, but I held up a hand, stopping her cold. Correction, I said, my words deliberate, sharp. You didn't lose it. You threw it away. You're not some victim here, Avery. You chose this, chose him. I jerked my chin toward Nolan, who flinched like I'd swung at him. Every lie, every night you spent with him, every dollar of mine you burned through, that was you. She exhaled, a shaky, ragged sound, her hands dropping to her sides. I know I messed up. I know. But you're being so cold. Please, can we just talk? I don't want to lose you. I tilted my head, staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Lose me? Avery, you lost me the second you picked him over me. You don't get to rewrite that now because it's not working out. I turned to Nolan, my smirk returning. So how's the dream life treating you, huh? Everything you hoped for? He looked away, his jaw clenching, no answer forthcoming. I nodded, satisfied. Yeah, that's what I thought. Avery sniffled, desperation clawing through her voice. Can we please just come in? 5 minutes, Grayson. That's all I'm asking. She was pleading now, her hands clasped like a prayer, but it wasn't contrition. It was survival. She wasn't here to make amends. She was here because she had nowhere else to turn. I straightened, stepping closer, my voice dropping low, lethal. You're not my problem anymore, Avery, and I'll be damned if I let you think you still have a hold on me. You made your choice, both of you. Now live with it. I glanced at Nolan one last time, his silence a confession in itself, then back at her. Goodbye. Grayson, wait, she started, lunging forward, but I stepped back inside, slamming the door shut with a force that rattled the frame. The lock clicked, a final punctuation, and I leaned against the wood, listening. Silence at first, then her muffled sobs, soft and broken. Nolan's voice murmured something, low, defeated, but I didn't catch the words. Didn't need to. Their footsteps shuffled away, slow and heavy, fading down the hall. Declan stood by the kitchen counter, pizza forgotten, watching me with a mix of awe and amusement. That was brutal, man. They earned it, I said, grabbing my whiskey and taking a long sip. The burn steadied me, grounding the adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. I didn't feel guilt, didn't feel the pang of loss I'd expected. I felt free, cleanly, completely free. You think they'll try again? He asked, leaning against the wall. I shrugged, settling back onto the couch. Maybe. Doesn't matter. They've got nothing left to throw at me. And they didn't. Avery's job was gone. Her friends had turned. Her family was ashamed. And Nolan, her knight in tarnished armor, hadn't even fought for her. They were a sinking ship, and I was already on solid ground. I checked my phone. Kendra had texted. Papers served. She's got 30 days to respond. You're golden. I smirked, setting it down. The legal gears were turning, the social fallout complete. Avery and Nolan could beg all they wanted. They'd lost me, and I wasn't coming back. I flipped the TV back on, the action flick resuming its chaos, and sank into the couch. The door I'd shut wasn't just to them. It was to a past I'd outgrown. And for the first time in years, I slept without ghosts. The weeks after that final confrontation slipped by like pages turning in a book I'd finally learned to read. I moved out of Declan's chaotic apartment, trading his couch for a clean, sparse one-bedroom downtown. White walls, hardwood floors, a view of the river cutting through the city. It wasn't home yet, but it was mine, free of Avery's fingerprints. The divorce barreled through faster than I'd expected. Kendra Miles was a force of nature, wielding evidence like a blade. Avery didn't fight it, not really. She'd signed the papers, her signature shaky, her response window closing without a whisper of resistance. Kendra called me the day it finalized, her voice clipped with triumph. It's done, Grayson. No alimony, no assets, she gets nothing. You're free. I stood in my new kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window, and exhaled. Thanks, Kendra. You're a goddamn miracle. She laughed, a rare crack in her steel. Just doing my job. Go live your life now. I hung up, the weight of 7 years lifting like a fog burning off under a clear sky. Free. The word tasted sharp, sweet, a flavor I hadn't known I'd been starving for. I didn't waste it. 2 days later, I booked a flight to Portland, Oregon, not Maine. A city I'd always wanted to see but never had because Avery hated the rain. I spent 2 weeks there, wandering moss-draped trails in Forest Park, sipping dark roast coffee in hole-in-the-wall cafes, letting the drizzle soak through my jacket without a care. Strangers struck up conversations. Hikers, baristas, a grizzled guy selling vinyl at a street market, and I found myself laughing, easy and unforced, in ways I hadn't in years. I wasn't running from the past. I was stepping into something new, something I'd built for myself. Back home, I leaned into it. I hit the gym, not to impress anyone, but because the burn of lifting weights, the rhythm of a 5-mile run, felt like reclaiming my body from the inertia of a dead marriage. I picked up old hobbies, dusting off my guitar, strumming chords I'd forgotten, the calluses rebuilding on my fingertips. Friends I'd lost touch with resurfaced, drawn by the gossip or maybe just the shift they saw in me. We'd meet for beers, shoot pool, talk about everything but her. Declan tagged along sometimes, his chaos a welcome contrast to my new order, grinning when he saw me smile. "You're a different guy, Gray," he said one night, clinking his bottle against mine. Better. He wasn't wrong. The man who'd walked out of that party, gutted, blindsided, was gone. In his place was someone sharper, surer, a Grayson Holt who didn't bend for anyone. The divorce had been the key, but living, really living, was the door swinging wide open. Avery and Nolan's fates trickled in through the grapevine, fragments of a story I didn't chase but couldn't avoid. Nolan's life imploded fast. Fired from his marketing gig after word of the affair spread through his office. His reputation trashed beyond repair. A buddy from our old circle ran into him at a bar. Said he looked hollow, nursing a whiskey alone, muttering about screwing up the best thing he had. I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd gambled on Avery and lost. Her descent was slower, messier. She'd moved back with her parents. Ellen's voice tight with shame when she'd called to tell me. "She's not the same, Grayson. Keep saying she'll win you back. But," a sigh, "we don't know how to help her." I heard she'd bounced between temp jobs, receptionist, barista, never sticking anywhere, her charm useless without an audience to play to. Friends stopped calling. Her social media went dark after those early, pitiful posts flopped. She tried reaching out a few times. Random emails, a handwritten note slipped under my old apartment door before I'd moved. "I miss us. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. She wasn't my ghost to exorcise. Then came Tessa Quinn. I met her at a friend's barbecue, the kind of casual summer night where the air smelled of charcoal and cut grass. She was leaning against a picnic table, a beer in hand, her auburn hair catching the golden hour light. She wasn't loud or flashy, just steady, with a quick laugh and eyes that didn't dart away when they met mine. We talked about music, travel, the absurdity of pineapple on pizza, and it flowed, effortless in a way I'd forgotten was possible. She'd asked about my guitar, and I'd played her a riff later, her smile warm, unguarded. "You're good," she'd said, and I'd grinned, feeling it down to my bones. Tessa wasn't a rebound. She was a beginning. We started slow. Coffee dates, hikes, late-night drives with the windows down and her playlist blaring. She listened when I talked, not just waiting for her turn, and when I told her about Avery, not the details, just the shape of it, she didn't flinch. "Sounds like she didn't deserve you," she said, her hand brushing mine, and that was that. No pity, no drama, just truth. With her, I wasn't fixing anything. I was building. One evening, months later, I sat on my balcony, Tessa beside me, a glass of wine in her hand, the river glinting below us. She laughed at some dumb joke I'd made, her head tipping back, and I watched her, struck by how easy it felt. How right. The past wasn't a shadow here. It was a footnote, fading with every day I chose this life over the one I'd left. I'd traveled, reconnected, carved out a space that was mine alone, and now I was sharing it with someone who saw me, not the wreckage I'd walked through. Avery and Nolan? They were footnotes too. Last I heard, their fling had fizzled, predictable, given the rot it was built on. Nolan drifted to some dead-end job out of state. Avery stayed stuck, a ghost in her parents' house, chasing a redemption no one cared to give her. I didn't gloat, didn't need to. Their collapse wasn't my victory. My life was. The divorce had unshackled me, but thriving, really thriving, was the revenge I hadn't planned but savored all the same. I glanced at Tessa, her profile soft against the dusk, and felt it. Peace. Not the fragile kind I'd clung to with Avery, but the real thing, hard-won and mine to keep. I'd rebuilt, better than before, and the road ahead stretched wide open. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my terms, alone or with her, but never again as the fool I'd been. 2 years had passed since I'd shut the door on Avery and Nolan. 2 years of carving a life from the ashes they'd left behind. My apartment had become a home, bookshelves lined with novels I'd finally had time to read, a guitar propped in the corner, photos of Portland's rain-soaked trails pinned to the fridge. Work was steady, friends were constant, and Declan. Still a mess, but a loyal one. Dropped by often, his chaos a reminder of how far I'd come. The divorce was a distant memory. Its scars faded into lines I wore with pride, not pain. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, fully, fiercely, on my own terms. Tessa Quinn was part of that now. A steady presence who'd slipped into my world without forcing her way in. We'd been together a year, our rhythm easy, weekend hikes, quiet dinners, her teasing me about my terrible pancake flipping skills. She was different from Avery, not in some dramatic, obvious way, but in the quiet strength she carried. Tessa didn't need to fill silence with noise or chase attention to feel alive. She just was warm, real. A woman who made me laugh until my sides ached and held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. With her, I wasn't rebuilding a broken man. I was growing into someone new. It was a crisp fall evening when I saw Avery again. A chance collision that felt less like fate and more like the universe tying up a loose thread. Tessa and I were leaving a restaurant downtown, a cozy Italian place with dim lights and the best tiramisu I'd ever tasted. We'd spent the night trading stories. Her about a disastrous camping trip, me about the time Declan set off fireworks in our backyard and nearly burned down the shed. She'd laughed, her eyes crinkling, and I'd felt that quiet peace settle deeper, a certainty that this, her, us was right. We stepped onto the street, her hand in mine, the air sharp with the promise of winter. Across the road, under the glow of a street lamp, I spotted her. Avery Holt, standing alone, a paper bag clutched to her chest. She looked different, not bad, not great, just stuck. Her hair was pulled back, limp and unstyled, her coat worn at the elbows, her posture slumped like she was carrying more than groceries. Time hadn't been kind, but it wasn't cruelty. It was consequence, etched into the lines around her eyes, the dullness of her gaze. She saw me too. Our eyes met, a fleeting lock across the distance, and for a moment, I saw it, the flicker of recognition, the jolt of what might have been. She froze, her lips parting slightly, but she didn't move, didn't wave, didn't call out. I didn't either. I smiled, not out of spite, not to twist the knife, but because I was happy, truly happy, and she wasn't part of that anymore. Tessa squeezed my hand, oblivious to the silent exchange, and tugged me toward the car. "Come on, it's freezing," she said, her breath puffing in the air. I turned away, Avery's figure shrinking in my periphery, and that was it. The last time I'd ever see her. I didn't look back, didn't need to. I knew what I'd left behind. A woman who'd gambled everything, love, trust, a life, and lost it all to her own hands. The grapevine had painted the picture over the years. Nolan gone, vanished to some nowhere town after their fling collapsed. His career and pride in tatters. Avery drifting, still with her parents last I'd heard, working odd jobs that never lasted. Her charm a faded echo no one cared to hear. She tried reaching out once more, a year ago, an email nostalgic and rambling. "I think about us sometimes. I messed up, Grayson. I know that now. I deleted it, no reply, no regret." She wasn't my story anymore. In the car, Tessa cranked the heat, rubbing her hands together. "You okay?" she asked, glancing over, her voice soft but curious. "Yeah," I said, meaning it, just thinking. She didn't press, just smiled and turned up the radio, some indie song filling the space between us. I leaned back, watching the city lights blur past, and let my thoughts settle. That glance at Avery wasn't closure, it was confirmation. She was a chapter I'd outgrown, a shadow that couldn't touch the light I'd built. I'd walked through betrayal's fire, and instead of burning, I'd forged something stronger, something hers could never break. The lesson hit me then, clear as the night sky above. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you, the gut punch of deceit, the shattering of trust, turns out to be the best thing that could. Avery's affair hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. It stripped away the blinders, the compromises, the man I'd let myself become to keep her happy. Some betrayals aren't meant to be forgiven. They're meant to set you loose, to push you toward a life you'd never have chased otherwise. I'd found mine. Travel, music, Tessa. A peace that didn't bend under pressure. The greatest revenge wasn't her ruin or Nolan's collapse. It was this. A life so good they'd faded into nothing, forgotten footnotes in a story I'd rewritten. I pulled into my parking spot, Tessa humming beside me, and killed the engine. She hopped out, tossing a grin over her shoulder. "Race you to the door?" I laughed, chasing her up the steps, the cold biting at my heels but not my spirit. Inside, we shed our coats, her teasing me about my slow sprint, and I caught her around the waist, spinning her until she squealed. This was it. My life, my joy, my beginning. Avery was a ghost I'd never mourn, and I was just getting started. For more tales of betrayal and triumph, of secrets that unravel and sins that reshape us, subscribe to Secrets and Sins. Every story's a lesson. Some burn, some heal, but they all set you